The Forgotten Hospital of Blood Creek. Welcome back to Dark Tales Unleashed, where nightmares become reality and reality becomes your worst nightmare. I'm your host, and tonight we're diving deep into one of the most terrifying true stories I've ever encountered. A story that will make you question everything you think you know about abandoned places. Before we begin this journey into absolute terror, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next in our series of real horror encounters. They say there are places in this world that exist between reality and nightmare. Places that shouldn't be there, but are. Places that have been erased from maps, deleted from history books, and forgotten by time itself. The Forgotten Hospital of Blood Creek is one of those places, but the people remember. In the small towns that dot the countryside around Blood Creek, they still whisper about it. They talk about the screams that echo through the trees on stormy nights. They speak of the metallic smell of blood that drifts on the wind, as if the very earth bleeds. And they warn you, if you're foolish enough to go looking for it, the hospital will let you in. But it may never let you leave. Let me tell you about Blood Creek Memorial Hospital. Built in 1923 on the outskirts of what was then a thriving lumber town, it was supposed to be a beacon of hope. A place where the sick could find healing, where families could find comfort in their darkest hours. But something went wrong. Terribly. Horribly wrong. The first strange reports came in 1941. Patients complained of hearing voices in the walls. Nurses reported seeing figures moving through the corridors at night. Figures that shouldn't have been there. Equipment would turn on by itself. Surgical instruments would be found arranged in bizarre patterns. Then came Dr. Edwin Harlow. Dr. Harlow was obsessed with blood. He believed that blood held the key to conquering death itself. In 1942, he opened what he called the Research Wing, a section of the hospital where he conducted experiments that would make Nazi doctors look merciful. Harlow's experiments were monstrous. He would drain patients of their blood and replace it with his own concoctions, mixtures of chemicals, animal blood, and God knows what else. The official records were destroyed, but survivors spoke of patients writhing in agony for days, their veins turning black, their skin mottling with infection. Some patients simply disappeared. No discharge papers, no death certificates, no graves. They entered Harlow's wing and were never seen again. Margaret Sullivan, a nurse who worked there from 1943 to 1945, gave a deathbed confession in 1987. She spoke of rooms in the basement where Harlow kept his successful experiments. They were still alive, she whispered to her priest. After everything he did to them, they were still alive, but they weren't human anymore. The townspeople began to notice changes. The creek that ran past the hospital, previously crystal clear, began to run red during certain seasons. Animals refused to go near the building. Children in the town started having the same nightmare. A tall man in a white coat, calling to them from dark windows. By 1960, even the most desperate patients refused treatment at Blood Creek Memorial. The hospital was hemorrhaging money, staff, and credibility. But Harlow refused to stop his work. October 13th, 1961. A date burned into the memory of every survivor from that night. At approximately 11:47 p.m., residents of the nearby towns reported seeing strange lights coming from the hospital. Not electric lights. Something else. Something that pulsed and throbbed like a massive heartbeat made of fire. Then came the screaming. Not one voice, but hundreds. A chorus of agony that rose into the storm-filled sky. People 20 miles away heard it. Some said it wasn't quite human. Others said it was too human. The sound of every soul Harlow had tortured, crying out at once. Emergency services tried to respond, but something was wrong with the hospital itself. The building seemed to breathe. The walls expanded and contracted. Windows opened and closed by themselves, and from every opening poured a thick, red mist that smelled of copper and decay. By morning, the screaming had stopped. The lights were dark, and Blood Creek Memorial Hospital was officially closed forever. But it was never torn down. No company would take the contract. No demolition crew would set foot on the property. The building was simply abandoned, left to rot. For decades, the hospital stood empty. Vines claimed the walls. Weather broke the windows. Nature tried to reclaim what humanity had abandoned, but nature couldn't quite manage it. The building resisted decay in ways that defied explanation. Paint that should have peeled remained intact in certain rooms. Metal that should have rusted stayed pristine. And in the basement levels, explorers reported that the temperature remained a constant 98.6 degrees, body temperature. In the age of the internet, the hospital gained a new kind of notoriety. Urban explorers came seeking thrills. Ghost hunters arrived with cameras and recording equipment. YouTube paranormal investigators saw it as the ultimate challenge. Many went in, not all came out. Between 2010 and 2020, 17 people were reported missing in the Blood Creek area. All were last seen heading toward the hospital. Search and rescue teams scoured the building multiple times, but found no trace of the missing explorers. No bodies, no belongings, no signs of struggle. It was as if they had simply vanished. This brings us to our witness, a man I'll call David, whose real name I'm protecting for reasons that will become clear. David contacted me 3 months ago with a story so terrifying, so detailed, that I had to share it with you. In David's own words, I was one of those fools who thought they could handle it. I'd been urbexing for years, had explored dozens of abandoned hospitals, asylums and morgues. I thought I'd seen everything. I was wrong. The night I drove out to Blood Creek, the fog was so thick I could barely see my own headlights. My GPS stopped working exactly 5.2 miles from the coordinates I'd found online. The paved road turned to gravel, then to dirt that was more mud than anything else. When I first saw the hospital, I actually stopped the car and sat there for 10 minutes, just staring. It wasn't like other abandoned buildings I'd explored. This one felt aware, like it was watching me back. The building was massive, 4 stories above ground, with architectural details that seemed to shift in the fog. Gothic windows stared down like empty eye sockets. The main entrance doors hung open, not broken or forced, but open, waiting. I grabbed my equipment, flashlight, camera, backup batteries, emergency phone, standard urbex gear. But as I approached those open doors, every piece of electronic equipment I carried began to malfunction. My camera's display flickered with static. My phone showed no signal, then full signal, then numbers I didn't recognize. The smell hit me first. You know that metallic smell of blood? Imagine that, but mixed with decay, mold, and something sweet and sick. It was so strong I actually gagged. My flashlight beam revealed a reception area that looked like it had been abandoned mid-conversation. Chairs were positioned as if people had just stepped away. A coffee cup sat on the reception desk, still containing liquid. Though what liquid, I didn't want to know. But it was the walls that really got to me, covered in handprints. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands layered over each other. Some looked fresh, and they all pointed in the same direction, deeper into the hospital. I followed the handprints because I had to know. They led me down a corridor lined with patient rooms. Most were empty, but in some the beds were still made. Hospital corners, sheets tucked tight, as if the staff had prepared them and were expecting new patients. That's when I heard the footsteps. David pauses here in his recording, and I can hear his breathing become labored even months after the experience. They matched my rhythm exactly, but came from behind me. Step, step, step. When I stopped, they stopped. When I moved faster, they moved faster. I spun around with my flashlight, but there was nothing there. Just more handprints on the walls and the lingering smell of blood. In one of the offices, I found something that should have been impossible. A rotary phone, sitting on a desk covered in what looked like medical files from the 1940s and 50s. The phone was disconnected. The cord had been cut decades ago. But when I walked past it, it rang. Not a modern ringtone, that old-fashioned mechanical bell ring. I stood there frozen as it rang 7 times. Then silence. I should have left right then. But curiosity killed the cat, and I was definitely the cat in this scenario. I picked up the phone. There was a dial tone. Impossible. But there it was. Then through the static I heard a voice. A woman's voice, speaking very clearly. "Welcome back, Dr. Harlow. We've been waiting for you." The phone exploded in my hand. Not metaphorically. It literally shattered, pieces of old plastic and metal flying everywhere. One piece cut my palm, and when I looked at the blood dripping from my hand onto those old medical files, the papers began to change. The words on the files started moving. I know how that sounds, but I'm telling you what I saw. The typed text rearranged itself, forming new sentences, new names, and my name, my real name, which I had never spoken aloud in that place, appeared at the top of one of the patient charts. The chart described procedures that hadn't happened yet, blood transfusions scheduled for tonight, surgical preparations, notes in handwriting that I recognized as Dr. Harlow's from photographs I'd seen online. The final entry was dated today's date, and it said, "Patient shows excellent potential for integration. Recommend immediate processing." That's when I realized the hospital wasn't just abandoned, it was active, waiting, and I had just volunteered to be its next patient. I ran, but the corridor had changed. Doors that had been open were now closed. Hallways that had led back toward the entrance now ended in brick walls. The handprints on the walls were moving, pointing in different directions, herding me deeper into the building. I found a stairwell leading down. Every instinct told me not to go down, but up was blocked by debris that hadn't been there before. The stairs were slick with something I didn't want to identify, and the temperature dropped 20 degrees with each step. At the bottom, I entered what must have been the hospital's main treatment floor. Gurneys lined the hallways, some still occupied by shapes under white sheets. The shapes were wrong, too tall in some places, too angular in others, and some of them were moving. That's where I met her, the nurse. She was standing at the nurse's station, updating patient charts. She wore a traditional white uniform that might have been pristine in 1960, but was now stained with substances I couldn't identify. When she looked up at me, I saw that half of her face was normal, almost beautiful, but the other half was melted, like candle wax, exposing bone and tissue underneath. She smiled with a good half of her face and said, "You're early for your appointment, but that's all right. Dr. Harlow is running ahead of schedule tonight." She gestured to a gurney that I swear hadn't been there a second before. It was prepared with leather restraints, and beside it sat a tray of surgical instruments that gleamed despite the rust that covered everything else in the hospital. "Just lie down," she said, her voice sweet despite the horror of her appearance. "The procedure doesn't hurt much. Not after the first few hours." I backed away from the nurse, but the gurneys in the hallway began to move on their own, blocking my path. The shapes under the sheets were definitely moving now, trying to sit up, reaching for me with arms that bent in impossible directions. I pushed through them and found myself in what must have been the main surgical theater. The light, which shouldn't have had power, flickered to life, illuminating an operating table surrounded by equipment that belonged in a museum of medical horrors. On the table was a patient, still alive, still conscious, but opened up in ways that should have been fatal. I could see their heart beating, their lungs working, their eyes tracking my movement, and they spoke to me. "Help me," they whispered. "I've been here so long. Please help me." But as I moved closer, I realized the truth. They weren't asking for rescue. They were asking me to join them. "It's not so bad," they said. "You get used to it, and you'll never be alone." The surgical theater filled with more patients, all in various states of Harlow's procedures. Some were missing limbs that had been replaced with medical equipment. Others had tubes running through their bodies, connecting them to machines that pumped blood in patterns that defied anatomy. All of them were alive, all of them were conscious, and all of them wanted me to stay. I found another stairwell, this one leading even deeper. The walls here were different, not hospital walls, but something organic. They pulsed with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat, and they were warm to the touch. Veins ran through them, carrying dark fluid that I knew wasn't water. At the bottom of the stairs, the hospital opened into something impossible. A vast cavern, with a river of blood flowing through it. Not flowing like water, flowing like it was alive, with currents and eddies that formed faces before dissolving back into the stream. A bridge crossed the river. Made of what looked like bone and surgical steel, it was the only way to the other side, where I could see a faint light that might have been an exit. As I stepped onto the bridge, hands began emerging from the blood river. Hundreds of them, reaching up, grasping. Some wore hospital bracelets with names I recognized from missing person reports. Others wore jewelry that looked decades old. The hands didn't try to pull me down. They were trying to climb up, using me as a ladder. And as they grabbed my clothes, my skin, I could feel their memories flooding into me. Memories of procedures, of pain, of being kept alive long past the point where death would have been a mercy. I made it across the bridge, but the light I'd seen wasn't an exit. It was something far worse. The heart of the hospital, literally. In a chamber the size of a cathedral, a massive heartbeat against the ceiling. It was the size of a house, covered in veins that stretched out to every wall, every corner of the hospital above. The heart was feeding the entire building, keeping it alive. But the worst part wasn't the heart itself, it was the faces. Pressed against the surface of the heart from the inside were hundreds of human faces, patients, staff, visitors, anyone who had ever been absorbed by the hospital. They were all there, all conscious, all part of the building's circulatory system. Pause. 4 seconds. I saw Dr. Harlow himself, his face twisted in an expression of horror and regret. He mouthed words at me, and somehow I could hear him despite the sound of blood rushing through massive veins. I didn't know. I thought I was saving them. I didn't know it would never stop. The heart began beating faster, and I realized it was responding to my presence. The hospital was trying to absorb me, to make me part of its circulatory system. I could feel my feet sinking into the floor, which had become soft and organic. What happened next defies explanation. I don't remember running, but suddenly I was moving through corridors that changed around me. The hospital was fighting to keep me, walls stretching like rubber, floors tilting to throw me off balance. Every door I opened led to the same room, the heart chamber. Every window I broke reformed instantly. The nurse appeared in front of me repeatedly, each time more decayed, more desperate. "You can't leave," she kept saying. "No one leaves. The treatment isn't finished." But somehow, impossibly, I found myself back in the reception area. The front doors, which had been open when I arrived, were now sealed shut. But the windows were open, and through them, I could see my car. Pause. 2 seconds. I threw myself through the window, cutting myself on broken glass, not caring about anything except getting away from that place. I reached my car as the hospital behind me began to scream. The building itself was screaming, a sound like metal tearing and bones breaking. I drove without looking back. But in my rearview mirror, just for a moment, I saw the hospital's windows lighting up one by one, and in each window was a face, watching me leave, remembering me. David's story should end there. A terrifying experience, but just one man's account. However, the evidence suggests something far more disturbing. 3 days after David contacted me with his story, I decided to investigate. Public records show that Blood Creek Memorial Hospital was indeed a real place, closed in 1961 under mysterious circumstances. But here's where it gets interesting. The hospital doesn't appear on any current maps. Satellite imagery of the area shows nothing but forest. Government land records list the property as permanently restricted, with no explanation. But David provided me with GPS coordinates, and when I cross-referenced them with missing person reports from the past decade, every single disappearance occurred within a 5-mile radius of those exact coordinates. I also reached out to locals in the area. Most refused to talk, but an elderly man named Frank Morrison, whose family has lived in the region for 4 generations, told me this. That place, it's still there. You can't see it most times, but it's there. We tell our kids to stay away from Blood Creek, especially on foggy nights. That's when it's most active. That's when it hungers. The disappearances continue. Just last month, a team of paranormal investigators announced their intention to explore the Blood Creek area. They were scheduled to live stream their investigation on October 13th, the anniversary of the hospital's closure. The live stream never happened. The investigators never returned. Their equipment was found scattered in the woods, but the cameras and recording devices had been destroyed in ways that suggested extreme heat exposure, as if they had been burned from the inside out. Local search and rescue teams refused to enter the area after dark. State police have unofficially designated the region as high risk for unexplained disappearances. And yet, people keep going. The hospital calls to them. David himself admits to feeling the pull. He contacts me regularly, describing dreams where he's back in those corridors, where the nurse is calling his name, where Dr. Harlow is preparing an operating table just for him. I know I shouldn't go back, David told me in our last conversation, but part of me wants to. Part of me feels incomplete. Like I left something important there, something that belongs to me. Skeptics, of course, have explanations. Mass hysteria, shared delusions, the power of suggestion combined with an already creepy location. Some point to the area's history of industrial pollution, suggesting that chemical contamination could cause hallucinations. Dr. Sarah Chen, a psychiatrist who has studied cases of shared paranormal experiences, offers this theory. Places with traumatic histories can create what we call psychic imprints. Strong emotions and experiences can leave traces that sensitive individuals pick up on. Combined with the power of suggestion and the human mind's tendency to fill in gaps with familiar horror imagery, you get consistent reports of supernatural activity. But Dr. Chen's theory doesn't explain the physical evidence. The missing people, the equipment failures, the fact that the hospital's location seems to shift depending on who's looking for it. And it doesn't explain why, 3 months after sharing his story with me, David has started receiving medical bills. Bills from Blood Creek Memorial Hospital for procedures that haven't happened yet. So there you have it. The terrifying true story of the forgotten hospital of Blood Creek. A place that exists between reality and nightmare, feeding on those who dare to seek it out. But I need to give you a warning. Since I began researching this story, I've received dozens of messages from viewers claiming to have found the hospital's location. Some have shared coordinates, others have posted blurry photographs. A few have even claimed to have visited the place themselves. If you're thinking of looking for Blood Creek Memorial Hospital, don't. The people who have gone looking for it fall into 2 categories. Those who never find it, and those who are never found again. David was lucky. He escaped, though he bears the scars, both physical and mental, of his experience. The cuts on his hand from the exploding phone never properly healed. They reopen every October 13th, bleeding freely no matter what medical treatment he receives. And sometimes, late at night, he still hears the phone ringing. That's all for tonight's episode of Dark Tales Unleashed. If you enjoyed this terrifying journey into the unknown, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our latest horror content. Check out the description below for links to our sources, including historical records and missing person reports related to the Blood Creek area. We've also included David's contact information for any serious researchers who want to hear more of his story, though we strongly advise against any attempts to locate the hospital itself. Join our community of horror lovers. Subscribe for more true horror, like if you dare share your own scary experiences below. Coming up next week, we'll be exploring the haunted lighthouse of Widow's Point, where ships still crash on clear nights with calm seas. You won't want to miss it. Remember, the things that scare us in the dark are often real. They're waiting, they're watching, and sometimes they're hungry. Sweet dreams, everyone, and stay away from Blood Creek. End screen. Subscribe button, related videos, social media links, hashtags for description, true horror, abandoned hospital, Blood Creek, horror, scary, paranormal, true story, creepy, haunted, mystery content. Warnings: medical horror, blood, psychological horror, missing persons. Engagement strategy: encourage viewers to share their own abandoned place experiences. Create polls about belief in supernatural phenomena. Consider follow-up videos investigating similar locations.